Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages and strange weirdos that would drink absinthe through their nose. That's unfortunately something that I have experience with. Now, today, partially inspired because somebody's comment about I like it when he's ranting, and somebody else describing my initial chatter as a sermon, I thought I would just put on a bit of my sort of frustration and kind of explain around about it at the moment. Now, I would like people, if you've had the same issues or similar issues, please put it down in the comments because I'm kind of curious as to how common this is. Now, obviously the title of this video is Bugs, and we're going to talk about that. And to start right off, if you go to the left hand of your screen, if you're playing EVE Online, and you click on the E at the top, you go down to EVE Help, you will get this window in the middle, and if you have bugs, you can go in here and report bugs. Now, it will, I'm not going to click that just now, because it will usually take you to the external website. Whoops, there we go. And you can submit things through EVE. You want to put in as much detail as possible. Sometimes I think that actually runs in game, but there's the main way of doing it on the client. There's also the way of doing it on the internet. And if you've got bugs, make sure you support them. Make sure you report them. Don't support them, for the love of God. And the reason I'm making this is because something came up yesterday. So I was running a couple of missions last night, just for shits and giggles. And there's a mission called Damsel in Distress, which, from my knowledge, that mission has existed as a level 4 mission since the beginning of time with EVE. At least it's been there since I started doing missioning, which was 2005, 2006. But there's a bug on it at the moment. And this bug has existed for over a year, because I've had it since it came back in. And that is when you destroy the structures inside the mission, when you destroy the two main sort of stations that are in the mission, they blip any drones you've got. They will just slaughter any drones. And at one point, not long after I came back, I lost 2 geckos to this. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? Like, where did they go? Because they're geckos, they can't instantly sort of go. And it's happened a few times, and I've reported, I didn't report it with the geckos, but I've reported it every time it's happened after then. Because it's come up a few times, and the drones aren't being attacked or taking damage, they just instantly disappear. So I've sort of reported this, and I've not really, before that point, witnessed many big bugs for the game. I've had a couple sort of desynchronization issues, which are understandable bugs, because I was in a place where my internet connection wasn't particularly solid and stuff like that. So I can understand those, and I've kind of reported them at the time and sort of sent in my client data just so that to help the development process. But one particular thing happened last night where I was on the game and the game disappeared off my screen entirely. And what happened was, it hadn't shut down, it was still running, but I couldn't get it onto the screen. And after about half an hour of trying, because I didn't want to shut down something else I was doing, eventually I managed to get it on, and it came up to the old login screen that you get in EVE sometimes. So not the launcher, but it used to have an internal login screen that's still there, but you don't often see it, for those of you that don't know. And it came up to that. And when I've come back in at the moment, as you can sort of see here, it's kind of thrown me, because I have I have specific windows that are always open, lots of chat windows, and it basically looks like it's entirely reset the client. And it's not saved anywhere. I've sort of gone through and had a look to see if anything is kicking about, if I can restore what I had. So I've lost a whole load of chat windows. I don't even remember all the ones I used to have, because I've sort of scanned through them, so it's going to take ages to reset that. And it's just a sort of, it's not a game issue, more as a convenience issue. But I've never seen that before. I've never seen something that would wipe out all of the data on the client for no particular reason. So much so that I went and checked it upstream and downstream on my feeds just to see what was going on, if I'd been hacked or something like this. No, there's no issues. It was just a blip in the game that caused the temporary files, or the files for Not just this client, but all of the logins that I've got, because I've got multiple games, but only one's in Omega. But they're set up to come up in different windows and different resolutions, because this is my main one, so I have it across the big screen. There are other ones that will sort of come in as half of the screen on the left hand side or half of the screen on the right hand side, and I've got the tall screen to the right hand side, which has the LG screen set up to have two clients on it, top and bottom. So if I'm everything's in Omega and it's all running, then I'll have it set up that way. But this was just a weird one that sort of threw me. I've never had it before. So if people have seen those sort of bugs and things like this, please report them. But also drop them down in the comments, because I'm kind of curious about this. And this is also stemmed from somewhere else. And what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to continue running this mission while I'm chatting, because I just need to run 2 more missions to get to the point where I can snag some LPs for something. I've got one of these, so I'm just gonna grab this, because why not? So I saw a video by Pirate Software. If you don't know him, your man Thor is a guy who started off as I think it's kind of funny to refer to him as a Nepo baby programmer. It's not fair, like, on his skill. He's got skill, he's known everything, but his dad was a programmer with Blizzard, and then he became a programmer with Blizzard. And he is very skilled. He's done sort of working for the American Department of Defense. Very knowledgeable, great guy for watching stuff. And he hates Eve. And he hates Eve because of Poshfin. And he put a video up a little while ago about the entire thing, which, go and have a look at it if you're interested. But it's a sort of a good microcosm of some of the stuff that I've been saying in the past. I'm sort of stuck here because I'm still sort of going through. I've got windows all over the place that shouldn't be all over the place. But yeah, so he basically goes through a little bit of chatting where he's talking about what he's done. I just realised that that's the wrong one because I'm in a different place than I was thinking. We are just a weird place here. So yeah, he was sort of explaining what happened with Poshfin, and basically him and his mates pulled what I refer to as a goon swarm. So for those of you that don't know sort of a bit of the origins of goon swarm, and I could be inaccurate on this, I'll put that out there. This is just the way it was explained to me, and it was explained to me over a decade ago, sort of when I was in the CFC. That goon swarm sort of came about because there were a whole load of players that came into the game that decided that they wanted to sort of overthrow some of the big alliances, and they just worked for it. And it was like they were originally the small guys fighting the bigger guys, and they built and built and built until they became the big guys and sort of absorbed the smaller guys. There used to be a Band of Brothers alliance. There's a lot of treachery behind that sort of thing, but it was quite an interesting sort of political stuff in game at the time. But essentially what happened was Thor, Pirate Software on YouTube and Twitching this, he had come in with his mates and they were doing the same thing with the whole Poshfin thing. And one of the mechanics in Poshfin was that you couldn't go through the gates if you didn't have standings towards the Triglavians, which I think is a really good mechanic, and I didn't realise it wasn't still there. But that meant that they could take ownership, and my overview is entirely shafted. This is going to be painful. Everything sort of reverted to standard stuff, and oh my god. Oh well, that ought to be interesting. But yeah, so the guys came in and they did this sort of thing where they were trying to work all this stuff out. Also, the mission I've brought up is now not on my stuff, and that's all different. Yeah, it's just messing with my brain, I tell you. Shit. Why have I got 3 active? This is the one I need to track. Yeah, okay, there we go. So your man Thor comes in with his mates and they do a little bit of doobly-doo and stuffs, and they sort of take over the joint. And they're running it for a while, but they notice that there's a bug on their main money-making thing. And the bug doesn't get fixed. The bug is essentially that somebody can troll them really easily, and this is a constant thing that's going on. I won't say too much more about it. Go and have a look at Pirate Software's video on Eve if you want to know about it. But essentially, they had reported it to the devs, and it didn't get fixed. It didn't get fixed for a while. And when it eventually did get fixed, what they were doing had been nerfed because the devs had changed the way that Poshfin works so that anybody can move through the gates, which in my opinion is actually kind of a dumb thing, because these are Triglavian gates. So the whole needing to have standings to move about kind of makes sense. And it's not difficult to get standings for Triglavians. All you have to do is jump into the area. If you don't know this, if you are sort of neutral to Triglavians and to, what's the other ones? Edencom, just jump into Poshfin and shoot a couple of drones and you will get standings. It's that simple, and my stuff is all over the place. So that's the easiest way to do it. So it's not a particularly difficult thing that you need to do, and it's something that in my opinion, it gives a bit more flavour to it. And it's something that I had sort of argued about in high sec with gankers not being able to transit gates and stuff like this, meaning that people that want to do ganking, they'd either have to use a lot of disposable accounts, which would sort of flag up things if they're doing naughty stuff, or they would have to grind for standings to be able to commit those crimes, because it's the only way to get back into high sec sort of thing. And I think that stuff is fair play, especially when you look at faction warfare, where you've got the likes of, you can't actually undock from certain stations in certain areas of faction warfare. I just think it would make that more sort of smooth sailing between all of the different ways that it works, all the different mechanics in Eve. So that's sort of something that they were saying about this bug reporting. But what was particularly bad, I think, what is the reason that it won't play anymore, and I don't entirely disagree with them, is that when this sort of came about and somebody else had started reporting these things, it was a long time that it took to get fixed, which can be understandable from a developmental point, but also the response that came was, oh, we thought this was just a problem with that group, so we weren't looking at it, sort of thing. Or it had the subtext of we weren't looking at it, which is obviously a particularly bad response to give to anybody in the community, when you sort of admit that part of the community was being ignored, because that's what it was. And now, again, pinch of salt, this is Thor telling a story, so I don't know how accurate it is, but at the same time, I'm inclined to believe it, because that's something that I've sort of been chatting about, the disconnect between the sort of the nullsec alliances and the high-sec player base. By the way, there was somebody in the comments the other day that had sort of called me out for, well, you're making up this whole 80% thing, you're just pulling a number out of thin air. It's like, no, I showed the specific Eve statistics for this. The 80% it was actually higher than 80%. But that's the one I remember, because that was the study that they did on MMOs, when they found that 80% of players throughout all MMOs do not engage in PvP combat. Now, for Eve, you get people that are in nullsec that don't do PvP, but you also get people in highsec that do PvP. But when you actually look at where people live, which is what I was talking about at the time, it's like 80% of people live in highsec. That's a fact. We know that because CCP showed that. I believe that when I showed it, it was, you can go back and have a look at the other videos, but I believe that it was in the 2003 talk from Eve FanFest on the Eve economy, if you want to go and have a look at it. It's a very interesting video. But we sort of know these figures and facts and stuff like this. We know how the community exists and where the focuses are. And this has been something I've spoken about in the past, and I won't bang on about too much, but essentially when CCP looks at highsec, they change it, and they never seem to change it in a way that is a boost for highsec. When they do it for wormhole space, it is very seldom that they do anything that is a boost. Or, likes of the auto miners at the moment, they have given wormhole space a boost, but that was actually a secondary thing. Because they were doing it to nullsec, and then they went, oh well, actually we should do this in other places. But that wasn't mentioned. In fact, somebody specifically said that the auto miners were only going to be nullsec. And then when they actually released it, after a lot of people had made comments about why the hell are you giving them bonuses when it should be applied evenly, that's where it sort of changed. But this is something that, for me, it's kind of weird that you would have that situation where you're not listening or you're biased against a player group. And sort of for the Poshfin one, it's, if you've got a bug report that comes in, you should be looking at it, just in general. And this is kind of hard for me to swallow as well, because I've actually had a very good time with, until this particular bug in a mission, with CCP customer service. I think that they're fantastic with a lot of things they do. And I've actually put in some questions, and I would characterise it as a waste of time because I wanted to know things and I just asked them directly. But at the same time, it's kind of what they're supposed to be doing. So you're in customer service, I do appreciate that stuff. But I wanted to check a whole load of things, especially when I was making some videos, because if you've seen my earlier ones, there's one particular one about mining and one particular one about multiboxing where I made a big mistake in a video, and I wanted to make sure that everything that I say going forward is accurate. You should always own your mistakes and sort of move on from them, but make sure that you don't forget them. So that was where sort of my head had come from with this, and it was a sort of, I thought it was quite interesting in the fact that somebody's experience, not just the newbie experience of I've come in, I've been ganked, I don't like the game, but this was people that came in and established themselves as a powerhouse. They had control of a large section of Poshfin, and they got nerfed bad enough for them to go, no, we're leaving. I think that's kind of sad, to be honest. And it does sort of explain a bit of the bias from Thor against EVE Online. But at the same time, that's annoying to see. Poshfin for me was a great idea with bad execution, because I think that the entire idea of the Triglavian War was fantastic. I was not in the game at the time. I was moving. I don't even think I was moving to Finland. I think it was at the point where I was already in Finland, but we were moving stuff and we didn't have great internet connection and stuff like that. So it was why I wasn't. No, it was the kids. That was the problem that happened. I had kids. But yeah, so I think that it was a great idea to do, but at the same time it screwed HiSec, because the links through HiSec have sort of deteriorated the way that you can transverse. And I think that although some areas were taken out, that other connections should have been established around about that to make, essentially, to stop there being a choke point between JITA and every other alliance that runs through the exact same area. You're essentially running through the same couple of systems if you want to go anywhere in the other three factions away from Caldari space, which you would correct that. Like, looking at the game, looking at the lore, you would correct that. So that's something that's kind of weird to me, and I'm chatting so much that I'm not paying attention to me shooties. Let's go shooties. So yeah, that's something that I think should have been addressed and should have been fixed, because although it's not a particular bug, it's player experience. And at the moment, and this happened again yesterday, where if you don't have the warnings about going into certain types of space, it doesn't show up on the autopilot anymore to tell you that the rules have changed. So I was autopiloting through HiSec. I just had it, the computer was on, I was doing something else, and all of a sudden I get attacked and I think, oh, somebody's trying to gank me. Good luck. But then I had a look at it and I was like, they're not flagged. What's going on? And then I saw the warnings on the left side of the screen that the actual security status had changed because of what was going on there. And I was like, why didn't it show any of that beforehand? But it's just one sort of pop-up, and if you disable it, you won't see it again. But there's no sort of visible signals that you are moving through high sec, and high sec is no longer high sec. And that to me is something that there is no benefit from that for an individual player. And it's just something that screws with the quality of life for players, because you're changing the fundamental mechanic of the game, and this is something that particularly pisses me off. You shouldn't do that. You can't get away with that. If you do that in the actual real world, here's a perfect example of this, because there was in Finland, the driving rules are slightly different from the rest of Europe, which, considering that there's a standardization in Europe, it shouldn't be. But they were changed a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, back to what they should be, or what exists in the rest of Europe, but they didn't tell anybody. One of the particular changes is if you come up to a 4-section interway, 4-section crossroads, obviously if it's a crossroads, everybody has equal priority. If it's a main road running through two sort of side roads, then the main road has priority because that's flow of traffic, and the side roads have sort of equal secondary priority, however you'd put that. But what actually happens in Finland, and what is particularly weird about it, or happened, was that if one of those roads is from a car park, then that person has lower priority. So if you've got a main road and then two roads coming in from the side, the one on the right is coming from a housing district, but the one on the left is coming from a shop, the one on the right has a higher priority than the one on the left. So if two cars arrive, with one coming from the housing district first and then one coming from the shopping slightly after, obviously the housing district would go first because they got there first, if it's just like sort of a little bit of delay. However, the way that it was actually working was that if you arrived from the shopping district first, but somebody from the housing district arrived shortly after, they would still have priority over you. And if you can't see where the shop is, so you don't know that that road is a shopping thing, then it creates all sorts of fuckery confusion, because the rules of the road require local knowledge. So if you're not from the area, you might not know that that's a shopping district. It causes all sorts of things. And I've literally seen accidents caused by this. Well, it turns out 3 years ago, the government went, oh no, that's a stupid rule, we should change that. And they changed it, but didn't tell anyone, which is just insane. And this sort of came up fairly recently because a mate of mine had an accident where this happened. And the insurance company tried to blame him for the accident. The police were called and the police basically said it's equal fault. So the insurance company tried to blame him and it was going to cost him a lot of money. And he turned around and was like, no, these are the rules. And the police officers dealing with it went, we didn't know that. It's like traffic police officers that don't know the rules of the road. I mean, you can't get a better example. But it was because of this rule change, and it's sort of been a little bit publicised now because of this. But I say a little bit, it was on the radio once. And not very many people know it. So you've got an entire country that doesn't know the rules of the road. And they have other funny things which are to do with the snow on the roads, where a road that is a corner, when the road goes straight, the corner will have priority, but it's usually because of bus routes and stuff like this. Again, it requires local knowledge, and they've kind of shunned away from this. But you would also get these, where these bus routes are, they would change between summer and winter because of where the buses were coming from. But that means that you're constantly changing the rules of the local road, which would cause accidents. Where I live, there is an actual junction next to a petrol station that the road priority would change between summer and winter. And it's the dumbest decision that you could have made, which is backed up by the fact that it's the biggest accident point in the local town. There are constant accidents there, at least 2 a week during the summer, 1 a week during the winter, where somebody smashes in because they were like, oh, well, I thought I had the right of way. And no, somebody flipped the sign and they hadn't seen it. So it's just this daft thing, because this is something that's going on in Eve at the moment, in high sec, where you go, right, I'm going from here to here, I'm in high sec, I'm going to autopilot, I'm not worth particularly much, so nobody's really going to gank me because it's not worth it. I'm heavily tanked, but I'm in an empty ship, I've got no faction mods, I'm safe-ish to autopilot. And then you autopilot and all of a sudden you're in low sec space and people can attack you without consequence. You're like, what the fuck? Where was my notification of that? Or there was one particular notification years ago that you might have cancelled and there is no other visual on screen. Who the fuck came up with that idea? And why have they not been taken into a shed with a bucket of fish or stinky Icelandic shark and fed it? Because just, come on, what the hell? So yeah, somebody had spoken about this in the comments about it being my sermon, so I figured, well, let's just let it flow. So for the moment, that's the video. I'm just going to send this back. Obviously, I am doing a particularly bad job at this. I'm not harvesting anything. I need 10 militants. So I actually should have thrown out the pack rat. But yes, I have to set up all of my screen, all of my stuff again, because this is just massively taking the piss. But I've got the long distance tractors and all this jazz. So yeah, that's sort of been my rant, my spiel, my stuffs. I've got a bit more free time in a moment, so it's not a particularly good thing, but I do have free time in a moment. So I'm going to be sort of dropping back in and doing a few more of the more helpful videos. I'm going to go through and do a lot of the missioning ones, because there's something, and this is kind of part of it. The paladin that I use is kind of part of my system when it comes to missioning. Basically because armor is actually a little bit better for running missions than shields if you are doing all of the level 4s when it comes to, because you have to sort of switch between the burner missions and things like this. But I'll get into that a little bit. If you have any sort of if you have bugs, please report them below. If you're somebody that has any sort of issues, something that annoys you about the game, essentially, if you're somebody who is played but something annoys you, or somebody who no longer plays Eve and you have a reason why you left, even if it's temporarily and you haven't cancelled your account, then please put that sort of down below. I'm curious about all of this stuff because I want to build up as much information on this as possible. If you've watched for a while, you'll know that I love the game, and it's part of the reason that I can see issues with the game is because I love the game. I've been involved with it for so long that I see everything good and bad. It's like a marriage. So it's one of those things that I want to try and grab as many other perspectives as possible, because when I'm presenting information, I want as many different viewpoints as possible. My sort of view on looking at a situation has always been kind of, if you're a single person, much like the camera here is looking at the ship, you have one particular view, which would be sort of like the ship here. And that's the problem, and that's how you see it. But somebody else's perspective might be over here. So for instance, in this situation, one person might say, look, here's a ship, it is white or it is yellow or something like this. And somebody else's perspective is, but it's got blue on it, as you can see sort of down here. And somebody else might be looking from here and go, well, it's just black to me. It's all the same thing, but everybody's got a different perspective, and that's kind of what I want to try and grab, is everybody's perspective of these things. So please, sort of, if you've got the time for it, drop down into the comments, stuff like that. If you sort of need any skill points, we've got the stuff in the skill points before. I've explained this before, where if you start a new account or you have an account and you haven't done this, there's a couple of little links below where you can get 1,000,000 free skill points for your thing, which is about a month of training. I get a kickback off of that if you do it. Sometimes if you subscribe to Omega through Eve, not on any of the other sites, then it'll give me 15 days of Omega time for my account. If you buy Plex through the Eve store, either through Ness or on the website, then I get a kickback from that, which is little skill boosters. Basically, I get about a 250 million-esque kickback if I sell the skill boosters. Usually, I throw 2 of them into training and sell 2 of them. It doesn't do much, but for those of you that aren't aware, oh god, even this is reset. I hate it all. I don't like having fixed windows, big full screen windows. But for those of you that don't know, I'm quite a high skill player. So I do have a lot of stuff. We're coming up on 200 million skill points, and then this is last month's stuffs, where they give us all the skill points for random things. That's everything I picked up last. No, that's not everything I picked up. It was 1,600, but I spent a whole load on something. And then I've got some other things going on, so you can tell that I've got a fair amount of skills. I can fly pretty much. I can fly every subclass in the game. Every what do you call them? Smaller class, normal class, not capitals. And then there's a few of the bigger ones that I can fly as well, because I used to do that shiny stuff. Oh, I need to do some more training on that thing. But yeah, so this is the general thing. I also have a Patreon. If you like rants and you have the coin to be able to spare, I have one Patreon and I love him. It's fantastic. That was really nice. Just something that made me smile. I've had a particularly shy time of it recently. So that was something that brought a little bit of joy. So thank you very much for that. It was very much appreciated. So yes, thanks for watching. There will be another video today, but it won't be Eve. Because I fancied doing something else, but I also fancied ranting, ranting is most probably ranting. I fancied chatting about a different subject. I'm actually going to chat about what Finland is like at the moment, because there's some weird fuckery going on here. So I figured I'd put that in a different sort of format. So I'm just going to finish off these 2 missions and then get to that. So let's have a spy. Do we have some marines in my stuff? I don't have any marines in my thing. In case you're wondering, I've got these things that are being opened. I need to have a look for Angel Cartel Personnel Thingamybobber. That's the one. So I'll reel this one in and then head back. So yes, thanks for the time. Thanks for watching. Comments below as usual. And yeah, thanks. Hope you're enjoying this. Bye!